Oops.
Hello there. Welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name's Robert Winters.
And I'm Judy Nathans.
And today's June 28th, 2016.
That's right. I'm just going to put up your website while you're talking.
So we're,
All right.
If I was a city official, I'd be all hooping and hollering because
Why?
it's 3 days to the end of the fiscal year.
Ah.
Right?
Oh, that's what they were talking about. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
It's always in June. You see these rather, for those who've never been around, you see these kind of cryptic city council orders about moving funds from the ordinary maintenance to the travel and training to the this,
that makes sense
that.
now. Sure.
Yeah, they just juggle all the money to basically
Which
to
is
close
what
the
they
books.
do at every state, federal. They all do.
Yeah,
that.
yeah, oh yeah. So it's that's what's happening.
Great.
And actually, speaking of the legislative branch of our local government, Cambridge City Council, this last night was the last meeting before the summer break.
Right.
So which means I get a break too.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay too much attention.
Except there seemed to be a slew of committee meetings, no?
Not that many. I thought that there would actually be more. I thought, it took them a little while to get all that established. There's a flurry of ordinance committee meetings of necessity. I did see there was, I think maybe after yesterday, there was they scheduled these sort of joint meetings of everybody's committees because everybody wants a hand in it. Certainly we're dealing with some of the Inman Square issues.
Oh, right.
But a few others.
Well, I think there's going to be a meeting on Councillor Mathen's Saturday supper. They're going to actually, I think it was referred to the neighborhood planning.
It was referred to his
hearing,
committee.
To have a meeting, right?
Yeah. I mean, at some point, I'm going to really just start referring to the various committees by the names of the chairs because they don't seem to have a whole lot of
Well, it's connection. A long one, too. Neighborhood, long-term planning and celebration.
They joined multiple. They used to have 13 committees. They whittled it down to 8 by joining them. So it's the neighborhood and long-term planning, arts, celebrations, and everything else you like committee.
So do you find out about these meetings and put it on your website? Because
usually I try and keep abreast.
Okay.
To some degree, I feel a lot of the things that I started doing in 1997, which the city didn't do, slowly but surely.
That was 20 years ago.
I know.
Wow.
Bit of a trendsetter here, right?
This counts as we're 10 years old.
Well, I started, that's right. I started tracking certain things and putting them up on a website. And, and then there would be a council order saying, the city ought to do this. And then they would start doing it. And so slowly but surely, a lot of the things that I would do, the city actually now does in terms of making information available.
Yeah, you're a trendsetter.
It's I like to think that the city is trying to make me obsolete slowly but surely. They're doing a pretty damn good job of it.
Well, I don't know.
Well, I mean, so I'm just left to do nothing, little more than the snarky comments, right?
Well, but at least, but you're it's easier though to get at sort of things immediately from your website. I mean, the city, I think the open meeting is good.
But hard to navigate sometimes, for me at least.
Yeah.
I've actually had even city department heads say to me over time, and still continue to say that it's actually easier to get things just by going to my site. But
that's what I mean.
But on the other hand, I'm not comprehensive. I mean, I tend to post the things that I find interesting.
You run like a little newspaper.
So not every celebration that's happening, not every press release that the city sends out. Kind of pass along.
You're going to select.
You can't do it all. I mean, I try to give a pretty good sampler, and as we've said on this show before, I like to think of it as sort of a user's guide to local citizenship.
It's great, and the candidate, people running for election like it because they can post materials and.
Actually, that continues to be one of the more gratifying things. Is if I'm in a public place and I get introduced to somebody, and
they'll say,
you're the guy that does that," and they're always like, "Oh, I'm so thankful for that."
Yeah, see, they do connect you to it, which is good.
So that's where we were talking about the Cambridge candidate pages, which I've done every
and once
2 years.
They present, you don't edit their pages, you just present their pages, right?
Well, actually, one of the things I've really been very, very strident about is I try and have a kind of a uniformity principle about candidate pages.
Oh, they should kind of look alike.
They should sort of look sort of the same. I mean, they can, if somebody wants to put some images in, we'll do that. That's fine. But I don't want to have one that's like filled with every possible bell and whistle, and the other one is bland.
Right.
I don't think that's kind of a good way to do things.
Oh, right, yeah, you're trying to, so
Yeah.
it's to their benefit.
You want things
somewhat
to be
uniform.
kind of even,
Yeah.
Steven. But the thing is I never, well, I'm not going to say never, but when I'm putting those together every 2 years,
Yeah.
I don't actually, let me say, I rarely give very overly specific questions to candidates. In other words, I don't try and pin a candidate down to
Right.
fashion their message to my agenda.
Exactly.
I think that's not fair.
Oh, do you send out the questions to them?
What I do, actually, I don't send out questions.
Oh.
What I do is I send out topics.
Oh, right,
And,
yeah.
and when I first did it, it was basically what I did is it was almost like writing up the job description of a city councilor.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know about municipal finance. You need to know about parks and recreation. You need to know about school
Public
funding.
works.
You need to know about public works, whatever. And basically made topics that said, okay, this is the job description. You give
Yeah.
me any statement you like
Right.
for that. And
Yeah, that's
I've
pretty
more
good.
or less stuck to that. I think I started off with maybe about 8 or 9 areas. It's probably grown, so now maybe it's a little longer than it should be,
Yeah.
perhaps. But I don't pin people down saying, well, what's your opinion on the Volpe site?
I mean, that's really up to the different organizations that then send out questionnaires for their forums.
If you're an advocacy group
Yeah,
and you
then
want
you can
to
do that.
pin
Right.
candidates down,
Right,
you
like the
do that. But
environment.
I do not see that as my job at all.
No, that's good.
So I've tried to be
Yeah.
an even Steven.
Right.
Now it was interesting, actually it was only like a month ago. So I don't know. June runs very, very fast in Cambridge City Council stuff.
Yeah.
There was an order from several of the councilors directing the election commission to put together a voter's guide, and I think their hope was that it would include statements from candidates and whatever.
That would be difficult.
I think
you mean a printed guide?
It'd be a printed guide mailed out to everybody and also made available in multiple languages upon the web.
No. Yeah, it's not time sensitive. It is a time sensitive. You can't do
The
that.
printed version certainly couldn't be.
Right.
But I think that putting up something that's sort of a voter's guide, sort of understanding proportional representation voting, the city could and should do
We
a
don't
little
have
bit
that?
more. We do have it. There's a brochure that's put together. It's in print and on the web, where if you wanted to understand proportional voting, or I should say ranked choice voting and proportional representation, it gives a pretty good idea. But the truth is that even though it's, I think, pretty well written, there are a lot of people read it and they'll still their eyes glaze over and they say, I don't get it. I think it could use a few versions, for the mathematically, let me be frank, for the mathematically inclined, for the person who's mathematically averse.
Okay.
I think there should be a version about ranked choice voting that basically says it answers the question, just tell me how to vote.
Well,
right?
actually, why not just default to that one?
I think you should. And then there should be, if you would like to know how the votes are tabulated, click here and find out more. But I think that the city shouldn't initially tell, they shouldn't even go into all those particulars.
No, they shouldn't.
So anyway, so I think there's certain things that the city could do in terms of doing a better job of getting voter education out there. I think they could certainly put the candidates' names into everybody's hands.
Yeah.
I wouldn't bother me if they put in a photo. That would be fine. But I think once you start saying, give us a statement, then then maybe you, for example, if you have a slate of 5 candidates, they all will then collaborate on the statement so that they're basically selling their slate. And then the city is basically putting it out there.
I mean, why should the city do it anyway? There's certainly enough groups that do this stuff, and I just feel like the city should just provide the mechanism.
You could argue that the city, if they did it, it would be more even-handed. It wouldn't be targeting specific populations, because every candidate and every organization that runs a slate takes the voter list and they curate it. They figure, well, we're going to target this constituency, or people in public housing, or North Cambridge, or whatever, and they do, and that's the way politics is run. I mean, I've had, it's one of these sort of oddball little joys I have in life is that when every municipal election is coming, there are people who are prospective candidates. People send them my way, and sometimes we actually work out strategies. And I remember one person was running for school committee, and we sort of decided that it was basically we're going to hit everybody in 02140.
So they get free consultation.
Yeah, I do it pretty even.
People get paid a lot of money for that kind of stuff.
I know. And actually, I have a pretty good track record on this. But
you have a career after your mathematics.
No. But I always like to give it kind of even-handedly to people, even people I don't like.
Yeah.
Though I have to say, in more recent years, if there's a candidate who I really find deplorable, I'll say, sorry, I'm busy. But, I've done that some because it just gets tiresome. If there's 20 some odd candidates and 8 or 9 new candidates and they want you to...
I know. At times it can be 28 people.
Yeah.
I would rather... the marketing of candidates should be left up. What I would like to see is more city-funded or at least caps on election spending to make it more fair.
Well, we talked about that a bit last week, and I'm actually, I mean, this is going to sound horrible, but I'm become very enamored with an idea I had last week, which was the idea of promoting the notion of a voluntary cap.
Yeah,
so
I like
saying,
that.
So we're
10,000 maybe.
No, it'd have to be more for.
Really?
You'd have to do different amounts for the school committee.
Okay.
It's sort of like maybe the way they determine speed limits, where you look at the 75th percentile and say that's the limit. So maybe we should do that. We should
and you
take
can
a look
use your
at
own funds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you can do is you look at what the average or median or some measure of what people actually spent in the most recent city council campaign.
It's a lot of money, though.
And some of them are way high, like $80,000, $90,000.
So I don't.
Right. So I wouldn't put that as the cap, but I would.
Throw out the high, you get rid of the low, and you come up with the average in the middle.
Well, it could be the median, or it could be 2/3 of the median, or something like that. Right. So you come up with something, and try not to be too onerous the first time through.
Right.
Basically, say we would like everybody to voluntarily agree to stay under $50,000.
Wow, that's pretty generous.
It is pretty generous, but the thing is, if you were to say to city council candidates, and especially incumbents who felt they had to spend $90,000 to get reelected, that we'd like you to voluntarily cut that down to a fraction, like $30,000. They laugh you out of the room.
Well, again, it would be a voluntary cap, so you could spend more, but then people would see who
blew past the cap.
I mean, I think there's some really good people out there that couldn't probably get more than 20, 25,000.
I actually think that if you ask people to adhere to a voluntary cap, some of the candidates might say,
"Oh, finally,
this is good."
Right, I don't have to waste my time raising money.
I don't want to be begging for that much money. And
look at our Congress if you don't think.
Yeah, and sometimes people will spend $70,000, $80,000 because they fear that the other guy is spending $70,000, $80,000.
What about city funded? Hasn't that been brought up before?
The idea of municipal supported municipal elections receiving public funds has come up before.
Does anyone else do it around the country?
Yeah, and there are certain restrictions about it. I think if we were talking about things like a mayoral race in a directly elected mayoral system,
that's true, it's different.
Things like that.
Yeah.
I think I pointed out perhaps last week about some of the potential problems if you have ranked choice ballots, where if somebody says, okay, if you meet a certain minimum threshold for fundraising, like 75 donations of $10 or more, so that's only $750. You could do that. You could actually get the same group of 100 people to write $10 checks for 15 candidates, and you could basically recruit 15 people to be part of a mega slate, and then bring in a bunch of public money, and then use that just to basically promote your slate.
So you're saying that is not good?
I don't think that would be such a good thing. Well, it's sort of become a race, because then if one side, if to whatever degree there are sides, and I kind of wish there wasn't. But if people want to define themselves into pro-development versus anti-development,
we're all Democrats. They have to have some development.
Right. But if people would do that, then if one side said, well, we're going to get this advantage and we're going to be eligible for $10,000 per candidate in public funds if we meet meet this threshold, then
let's get,
you'll run
Okay.
15 candidates, pull in $150,000 in public funds, and then the other side, if there's another side, will feel they have to do the same. And then
right.
next thing you know, you've got 50 candidates running,
Yeah.
all just because they wanted to do it as a fundraising machine. So anyway, that's just one aspect of why I think there's some questions to be asked about
Plus it would be
publicly
expensive,
funded.
I guess, too.
And the other thing too is beyond just the mechanics of that and the potential abuses is there the need?
Yeah.
I've heard people say, well, this will give people of diverse backgrounds and qualities
Yeah.
more of a chance to do this. Honestly, I've been watching Cambridge elections longer than anybody, and I have never seen any particular barriers to particular types of candidates for running. Sure, they may have some potential problem.
But you're saying if they're very talented and people like them and they've got good ideas, they probably can raise some money.
And that money will flow to them
Money
if
will
you
flow,
got something
yeah.
to say. I mean, the thing
Right.
is that if you're very fringy,
I was just gonna
then
use that word.
chances are people say you're not
Yeah.
serious. You're not a
Yeah.
serious candidate. We're not going to give you money. And I don't know
Okay.
that.
So
to
it
me-
sort of self-selects in a way.
Yeah.
All right.
So to me,
But so having a cap would be great.
I think a voluntary cap would really be the right way to go. And I think
Okay.
if this matter was referred to two committees. One was, and I think it was it'll be government operations
Right.
and
They've got their hands full.
So it's and neighborhood and long-term planning, which makes no sense for this, but it's
Yeah.
basically David Marr's committee and Nadeem Massen's committee.
So it's
it's
probably not going to go anywhere right now.
Well-
Not with the city manager search and everything, right?
I think it's tough enough to do it,
Yeah.
and I think there are legal issues that have not been
Right.
properly addressed.
Yeah.
So I don't see it happening anytime
And
soon.
actually, when you look at some of the results, just because you spend a whole lot of money doesn't mean you get number one. So I
Right.
guess- So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
okay.
Right,
All right.
so-
Let's go on to something. What else happened? Well, obviously
Yeah. So there.
talk about that.
Yeah. So there were two horrible tragedies in Cambridge this past
That's true.
week.
People don't. I missed the last part of the meeting where I think.
Right.
Mayor
So
Simmons-
the first was on Thursday afternoon.
Was it Friday or Thursday?
Thursday afternoon.
Okay.
It was a cyclist,
Right.
Amanda Phillips,
12.
was cycling in and around Inman Square, passing through Inman Square, apparently, and the details are actually a bit in dispute as to exactly what happened, but. There apparently was the cyclist hitting a door of a car or swerving to avoid hitting a door of a car, and consequently falling to the ground and being killed by a passing truck.
Passing truck.
The supposition from most of the people who were speaking to this, I think, was that it was your standard
Dooring.
You're riding down the street, somebody throws a door out open, and you
Without looking,
hit it or
right.
fall, and down you go,
Yeah.
right? But apparently, it
Wasn't
was
exactly
a little more
like that.
complicated, and it may very well be related to the awkwardness of Inman Square itself,
Yeah.
where cyclists. And again, I'm only supposing a bit here now, where cyclists, because it's a very long run with a lot of traffic coming right across
Talking
you.
about Cambridge Street?
Well, if you're, for example, going
Yeah.
on Cambridge Street and then
Yeah.
crossing Hampshire into
Right.
Beacon,
Yeah.
if you just go straight like you would if you're a motor vehicle, you're out in the open and you have that sense of vulnerability about
Yes.
crossing traffic for good ways.
Right.
So many cyclists I've seen over the years will do things like they'll skate along the edge, kind of follow the crosswalks to sort of navigate their way through, come out, and then continue on the road like they wanted to.
So they walk their bike or they go
You probably
like a pedestrian?
Well, well, I guess in the sense that you're going on the sidewalk, I guess you are to some degree acting like a pedestrian, but you might still be riding, and you might have to stop, right? So, and I didn't know this until I went up to city council meeting. I was sort of hearing some scuttlebutt.
Yeah.
I just thought she was riding on the road.
So she was a combination of
And
sidewalk
I think
and
what it seems more likely, and apparently it was reported in the Cambridge Chronicle this morning,
Okay.
that she actually was coming off a sidewalk and then turning onto the road, possibly the automobile driver she might have looked in a rearview mirror and not seen anything.
It was a parked car, right?
It was a parked car.
Yeah.
And then the bicyclist came around the car. Right. So so a lot of the arguments about why you need to move bicycles to the right of cars and all these things, a lot of the arguments that people are saying in public comment were kind of a mismatch to what the facts may have been.
In this instance.
Yeah, I've always felt that I think statistics prove basically that the most dangerous aspect of cycling in an urban setting is at intersections.
Yes, and that is a troublesome intersection.
Right, so it's right-turning vehicles or so-called right hook.
All those cars coming together.
Left cross.
So
and even on one of the reasons some people, myself, are skeptical about cycle tracks is because you're putting bicycles in a position where they're less visible to motor vehicles.
That's probably not a good place to have cycle tracks.
Probably
I don't know how they
not.
could because of the way the intersections are.
I think what happens is there's so many driveways and other streets that you then have to cross that you basically be putting cyclists in a position where motor vehicle operators who are about to turn don't see them at all.
Right.
So the only way you could do it is by removing all the parking.
Which was proposed.
Which some people want to do that.
On some level, that would solve the problem. I'm not sure we can.
I don't know that that's such a necessary thing. And the other problem is that traffic engineers. This is sort of one of those crazy terms of art, but they refer to streets that have cars parked on both streets as sort of a form of friction. Or even having no median down the road as friction, so that cars won't drive as fast because they're in relative close proximity with oncoming cars, with parked cars, so they tend to moderate their speed. You put in a median, like along some of the streets like Huntington Avenue in Boston, or if you remove the parked cars, like along sections of Prospect Street in Cambridge, then it's just like opening the gates and cars just go like a highway.
So that's not good?
Well, so I think people should be...
There are speed limits.
There are speed limits.
That's another issue that came up, which is...
it's the psychology of the motor vehicle operator.
Yeah, but if you have big bicycle share the road signs, then at least maybe they go slower.
I think that helps.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah, or you something that very clearly says this is a pedestrian cyclist intensive zone.
It's a good point.
Right, right. But the thing is that and you can see this in places like where if you remove the parking, traffic goes faster.
I guess. Yeah, I guess it depends on the street.
Some people also argue if your lanes are too wide, traffic goes faster because again it takes away that perception that you have to be extra careful because we have these luxuriously wide lanes.
Yeah, it's true.
So a lot of the suggestions people were making, or the demands that people were making, I was listening, going like, you really have to think this through. It's not as simple as let's just take all the bikes off the roads and everybody's going to be happy.
Ban 100 cars.
Right, because you may very well end up with cars going faster and then increased problems for pedestrians. Right. One thing that was sort of a strange twist about this. So this horrible tragedy takes place. But I think it was the day after there had been a meeting nearby up at maybe at Uber.
No, the day before.
It was the day before.
Yes.
There was a presentation. Joseph Barr from the Traffic, Parking, and Transportation.
Dennis Berlin was there.
And others. I couldn't make it, but
it was on these issues, like
it was on this. And actually, we should even show an image or two about some of the proposals, but we'll do it in the next half hour, but we'll lead off with that.
Is that the possible reconfiguration?
Yes, possible reconfigurations of Inman Square. When I went to the council meeting last night, I thought this wasn't specifically related to Inman Square, other than the fact that it happened to occur next to Inman Square, because I thought it was just along a straightaway, somebody opened a door. Yeah. But in fact, it may well be that this is intimately related to the geometry of Inman Square, which has been horrible for pedestrians, motor vehicle operators, and cyclists for as long as I can remember. And I've lived in the neighborhood for over 35 years.
Are big trucks allowed on that street?
If they are, I think there's no...
buses are, right?
I think, there are buses on both streets, and trucks are not banned specifically, certainly, and there are some making deliveries that way. But it's not always the trucks. I mean, it's just sort of this game of chicken, and there's this really long stretches. So even when a light changes, there might still be vehicles passing through.
I mean, we were talking about this before. We have an old city that, as we develop, we have the car came along, and then, and we're trying to adapt to all these new ways of transportation, but we have some old infrastructure, and it's just so much, it's a dilemma.
It's sort of, I find it kind of interesting and almost paradoxical that the city is promoting two diametrically opposite solutions.
No cars.
Well,
No.
Well, I don't know if there's any place where they're promoting no cars.
That was said last night. No parking.
Well,
Get rid of 100
right.
cars.
So one idea is you thoroughly separate. So pedestrians on the sidewalk, cyclists in their little track, motor vehicles in there. So it's total segregation.
Right.
Right. And then meanwhile, like down here at Blanche Street and some other places, the city's been experimenting with what do they call them, woonurfs?
What are those?
It's a Dutch word, I believe, that basically means shared street. So they actually remove curbs, and it's apparently in some European cities this works like a charm.
Yeah.
You have cyclists, pedestrians, motor vehicles, everything. They could even take away the double lines in the middle of the street.
I don't understand. What are you removing?
Pretty much they take away the signals, they take away everything, and then everybody...
No sidewalks?
And it ends up being safer.
Well, I'd have to see that visually before I go in there.
Well, you can go to Winthrop
sure.
Street in Harvard Square. You go to Palmer Street in Harvard Square.
Yeah.
Now, these are not the best example because they're relatively modest traffic streets anyway.
Yeah.
But, so the city on the one hand promotes, shared streets.
Yeah.
And then thoroughly segregated streets. So there's a place for both. My view, high-speed arterials should have cycle tracks.
Yes.
But a lot of other ordinary streets, no. So anyway, we'll be back in 3 minutes. So see you then on Cambridge Inside Out.